Hello and welcome. In this video, we are discussing about Java server pages, implicit objects. So, in this chapter, we will discuss implicit objects in JSP. So, these objects are the Java objects that the JSP container makes available to the developers in each page, and the developer can call them directly without being explicitly declared. JSP implicit objects are also called predefined variables. So the 9 implicit objects that JSP supports: object and description. First, request. This is the HTTP servlet request object associated with the request. Response. This is the HTTP servlet response object associated with the response to the client. Out is the print writer object used to send output to the client. Session is the HTTP session object associated with the request. Application is the servlet context object associated with the application context. Config is the servlet config object associated with the page. Page context encapsulates use of server-specific features like higher performance JSP writers. Page is simply a synonym for this and is used to call the methods defined by translated servlet class. Exception object allows the exception data to be accessed by designated JSP. So the request object. The request object is an instance of a javax.servlet.http servlet request object. So each time a client requests a page, the JSP engine creates a new object to represent the request. The request object provides methods to get the HTTP header information, including form data, cookies, HTTP methods, etc. Response object. So the response object is an instance of a javax.servlet.http servlet response object. So just as the server creates the request object, it also creates an object to represent the response to the client. The response object also defines the interfaces that deal with creating new HTTP headers. And through this object, the JSP programmer can add new cookies or date stamps, HTTP status codes, etc. The out object. So the out implicit object is an instance of a javax.servlet.jsp writer object and is used to send content in a response. The initial JSP writer object is instantiated differently depending on whether the page is buffered or not. And buffering can be easily turned off by using the buffered equal to false attribute of the page directive. The JSP writer object contains most of the same methods as the java.io.printWriter class. However, JSP writer has some additional methods designed to deal with the buffering. And unlike the print writer object, JSP writer throws IO exceptions. So the important methods that will be used to write boolean char int double object string etc. Method and description. First, out.print data type dt, print a data type value. Out.println data type dt, prints a data type value and then terminate the line with a new line character. Out.flush, flush the string. Session object. So the session object is an instance of javax.servlet.http session and behaves exactly the same way that session objects behave under Java servlets. The application object is direct wrapper around the servlet context object for the generated servlet and in reality an instance of a javax.servlet.servlet context object. and this object is a representation of the JSP page through its entire lifecycle. And this object is created when the JSP page is initialized and will be removed when the JSP page is removed by the JSP destroy method. And by adding an attribute to application, you can ensure that all JSP files that make up your web application have access to it. The config object is an instantiation of javax.servlet.servletConfig and is a direct wrapper around the servlet config object for the generated servlet. And this object allows the JSP programmer access to the servlet or JSP engine initialization parameters such as paths or file locations. The config method is the only one you might ever use, and its usage is trivial. Config.getServlet name. This returns a servlet name, which is the string contained in the servlet name element defined in the web.inf/web.xml file. The page context object is an instance of a javax.servlet.jsp.pageContext object, and the page context object is used to represent the entire JSP page. And this object is intended as a means to access information about the page while avoiding most of the implementation details. And this object stores references to the request and response objects for each request. The application config session and out objects are derived by accessing attributes of this object. The page context object also contains information about the directives issued to JSP page, including buffering information, error page URL, and page scope. The page context class defines several fields including page scope, request scope, session scope, and application scope, which identify the core scope. It also supports more than 40 methods, about half of which are inherited from javax.servlet.jsp context class. And one of the important methods is remove attribute, and this method accepts either one or two arguments. For example, page context.remove attribute name removes the attributes from all scopes, while the following code only removes it from page scope. Page context.remove attribute name, page scope. The page object. So this object is an actual reference to the instance of the page, and it can be thought of as an object that represents the entire JSP page. The page object is really a direct synonym for this object. The exception object is a wrapper containing the exception thrown from previous page, and it is typically used to generate an appropriate response to the error condition. So this was a brief discussion on Java server pages implicit objects. Thanks for watching this video. Bye for now.